It was supposed to be a routine interview, but when veteran CNN journalist Victoria Hayes pressed record with a hidden agenda, she had no idea that within 47 minutes, her 20-year career would be in ruins. What if I told you that one of CNN's most decorated journalists spent 3 weeks planning an ambush interview designed to destroy Charlie Kirk on live television, only to have a single question expose 2 decades of her own journalistic lies? What if the woman who built her career speaking truth to power was revealed as someone who had never actually spoken truth at all? And what if millions of viewers watched in real time as her credibility, her awards, and her entire legacy collapsed because she couldn't answer one simple question Kirk asked her? This is the story of how Victoria Hayes discovered that when you build your career on deception, eventually someone will hand you a mirror. Victoria Hayes sat in the makeup chair at CNN's Manhattan studio, reviewing her notes one final time. At 48 years old, she was at the absolute peak of her journalism career. 2 Peabody Awards, 3 Emmys, a best-selling book called Speaking Truth: How Journalism Can Change the World. Her primetime show averaged 2.3 million viewers, and her interviews were mandatory viewing in journalism schools across America. Tonight's guest was Charlie Kirk, scheduled for what the booking called a balanced conversation about free speech on college campuses. But Victoria had very different plans. For 3 weeks, her production team had been assembling ammunition, edited video clips stripped of context, old quotes taken from deleted social media posts, a coordinated strategy to trap Kirk in contradictions that would dominate the news cycle for a week. Her producer, Marcus, had been hesitant. "Victoria, some of these edits are aggressive. If Kirk has the full videos, this could backfire." Victoria had dismissed his concerns with the confidence of someone who had never lost a televised confrontation. "Marcus, I've been doing this for 20 years. Trust me. By tomorrow morning, Charlie Kirk's credibility will be destroyed, and we'll have the viral moment of the year." In the green room, Victoria was warm and gracious with Kirk. She asked about his flight, complimented his organization's growth, even laughed at a joke he made about airport security. It was a performance she'd perfected over 2 decades: make them comfortable, earn their trust, then destroy them when the cameras turned on. But the shocking thing was about to happen. The interview began exactly as Victoria planned. Softball questions about campus culture, free speech principles, and student engagement. Kirk answered thoughtfully, even eloquently. He seemed relaxed, almost enjoying the conversation. Victoria smiled warmly, nodding along, building rapport. 5 minutes in, she was setting the perfect trap. Then she struck with surgical precision. "Charlie," Victoria said, her tone shifting like a blade being unsheathed, "I want our viewers to see something." The screen behind them lit up with a video clip. Kirk at a 2019 campus event. Mid-sentence, the edit making his statement about immigration policy sound extreme and inflammatory. "Can you explain to millions of Americans watching right now why you think immigrants are invading our country?" The studio audience stirred. Victoria's smile was confident, almost predatory. She'd used this exact tactic 47 times in her career, and it had worked every single time. Play the damaging clip, ask the accusatory question, watch them scramble to defend the indefensible while the internet explodes with outrage. But Kirk didn't scramble, he didn't get defensive. He just looked at Victoria with something that almost seemed like disappointment. "Victoria," Kirk said quietly, "that clip is missing 90 seconds of context. The full video, which your team absolutely has because I can see the file name on your producer's monitor from here, shows me praising legal immigration for 10 minutes before and after that statement. Would you like to play the complete clip so your viewers can see what I actually said?" Then everything changed. The confidence drained from Victoria's face like water from a broken glass. Her eyes darted to Marcus in the control room, who was frantically shaking his head. Kirk had just done something none of her previous guests had ever done. He'd called out her deceptive editing, not with anger but with evidence. "We showed the relevant portion," Victoria started, her voice less certain now. "No," Kirk interrupted gently. "You showed a manipulated portion, and you know it, because 3 weeks ago, your production team requested the full footage from our media department. They have the complete video. They edited it specifically to misrepresent my position." "That's not journalism, Victoria. That's propaganda." The studio went completely silent. Viewers watching at home leaned forward. This wasn't how these interviews usually went. Victoria Hayes always controlled the narrative. Always. But something was different about this moment. Kirk wasn't just defending himself. He was putting Victoria on trial. "Mr. Kirk, I'm the one asking questions here," Victoria said, trying to reassert control. "And I'll answer them honestly," Kirk replied. "But first I have a question for you, and I think your viewers deserve an answer." But the most shocking moment was yet to come. Kirk pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up so the camera could see. It was a screenshot of a tweet from Victoria's verified account, posted 6 weeks earlier. Victoria, you tweeted, and I'm reading your exact words here. Republicans use campus free speech as cover for spreading racism and white supremacy. That's a direct quote from you. Not taken out of context, not edited, your complete thought. Kirk looked directly at her. So I have to ask, if you genuinely believe that defending free speech is just cover for racism, how can you claim to be conducting a fair interview about free speech right now? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Victoria's face went pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, because Kirk had just done to her what she had spent 20 years doing to others, exposed the gap between her public image and her private beliefs. That tweet was about specific instances. Victoria stammered. Was it? Kirk asked. Because it seems pretty clear. You called Republicans, not specific individuals, but Republicans as a group, racist for defending free speech, and now you're interviewing me, a Republican defending free speech, while pretending to be objective. Doesn't that make this entire interview fundamentally dishonest? What no one expected came next. The studio audience began murmuring. Marcus was screaming in Victoria's earpiece to go to commercial, but she couldn't hear him anymore. All she could hear was the sound of her own credibility crumbling in real time. Let me ask you something else, Victoria, Kirk continued, and his voice was still calm, still measured, but there was steel underneath now. You've accused me of being divisive, of spreading hate, of poisoning campus discourse, but have you ever actually attended one of our events? Have you ever talked to students who support our organization? Have you ever engaged with our actual positions instead of the caricatures your sources feed you? Victoria's silence was deafening. I didn't think so, Kirk said. Because if you had, you would have met Maria, a first-generation immigrant student who credits our scholarship program with keeping her in college. You would have met Jamal, a black conservative student who says our chapter was the first place on campus where people listened to his perspectives without assuming he was a sellout. You would have met Sarah, whose single mother started a small business with help from our entrepreneurship initiative. Kirk leaned forward, and for the first time, there was emotion in his voice. Not anger, something deeper. You've built your career on the idea that you speak for marginalized communities, but have you ever stopped to ask those communities if they want you speaking for them? Or do you just assume you know what's best for people you've never actually talked to? The devastating realization spread through the studio. Victoria Hayes, the woman who had humiliated senators, demolished political careers and reduced corporate executives to stuttering apologies on national television, had no response. Because Charlie Kirk wasn't attacking her journalism, he was exposing that she had never been a journalist at all. She had been an activist with a press pass, a partisan warrior dressed in the costume of objectivity. Victoria, Kirk said, and his voice was almost gentle now, I came here tonight thinking we could have an honest conversation about ideas, but you came here to destroy me with edited clips and gotcha questions. So let me make you an offer. Right now on live television, I'll answer any question you have about my actual positions. No edits, no tricks, just honest answers to honest questions. Can you make me the same promise? Can you have an honest conversation? The camera pushed in on Victoria's face, and the whole world watched as she made a choice. She could admit her tactics were dishonest and try to salvage something, or she could double down and lose everything. She doubled down. Mr. Kirk, you're trying to make this about me when we're here to discuss your organization's problematic. The moment that destroyed everything came next. Okay, Kirk interrupted. Then let's discuss it. Let's put our actual evidence on the table. You show your proof that my organization promotes racism, or white supremacy, or whatever you've accused us of, and I'll show my proof of your deceptive editing practices, your pattern of taking quotes out of context, and your history of corrections you never issued for false stories. We'll let the viewers judge who's been honest and who hasn't. Victoria looked trapped. Kirk was calling her bluff, and they both knew she had no real evidence, just edited clips, secondhand accusations and assumptions she'd never investigated. We're going to commercial, Victoria said abruptly, her voice shaking. Of course we are, Kirk said to the camera, because this is what happens when activists pretend to be journalists. The moment someone asks for evidence instead of accepting narratives, the conversation ends. The camera cut, but it was too late. The exchange was already clipped, shared, trending. Within 10 minutes, Victoria Exposed was the #1 trend on Twitter worldwide. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. CNN's phones lit up, not just from conservatives, but from viewers across the political spectrum demanding answers. How had Victoria edited that immigration clip? Why hadn't she disclosed her personal beliefs about Republicans before conducting the interview? Where was the evidence she claimed to have about Kirk's organization? Media ethics professors began dissecting the interview in real time on social media. Columbia Journalism School's dean called it a masterclass in how confirmation bias destroys journalistic integrity. Even liberal commentators admitted Victoria had crossed a line. By midnight, CNN's internal review had discovered something devastating. Victoria's deceptive editing practices weren't new. For years, she had been systematically manipulating footage to fit predetermined narratives. Interview after interview, guest after guest, she had edited reality to match her ideology. The network had a choice: stand by Victoria and admit they'd been complicit in systematic journalistic fraud, or cut her loose and try to salvage their credibility. They chose survival. The transformation was swift and merciless. Victoria Hayes's resignation was announced at 6 a.m. the next morning. Her producer Marcus, who had enabled her tactics for years, was terminated. Every interview she'd conducted in the past 5 years was flagged for review. Her Peabody Awards were recalled. Her Emmy Awards were under investigation. The book deal for her second book was canceled before lunch. But the most painful moment came when Victoria's own daughter, a junior at Northwestern's journalism school, posted a statement on social media. "My mother taught me that journalism was about truth. Today I learned she never believed that herself. I'm ashamed and I'm sorry to everyone she misled, including me." Kirk, meanwhile, was invited to speak at journalism schools across the country, not to celebrate his political victory, but to discuss what had happened from a media literacy perspective. He didn't gloat. He didn't attack. He simply explained what he'd done and why it had worked. Victoria Hayes destroyed herself, Kirk told a packed auditorium at NYU. "I didn't have to do anything except ask for honesty and accountability, the same standards she claimed to represent. When journalists abandon those standards, they don't need enemies. They become their own worst enemy." The lesson resonated far beyond one failed interview. Journalism schools added Kirk's interview to their ethics curricula, not as a political statement, but as a case study in what happens when advocacy replaces investigation. Students analyzed how Victoria's biases had blinded her to basic journalistic principles, how her certainty that she was right had prevented her from asking whether she might be wrong. News organizations implemented new editorial standards, full context requirements for video clips, disclosure requirements for interviewer biases, third-party review processes for contentious interviews. The entire industry was forced to confront a question it had been avoiding. Were they informing the public or manipulating them? Victoria Hayes faded from public view. Her social media accounts went silent. Her name became shorthand in newsrooms for journalistic malpractice. The woman who had spent 20 years claiming to speak truth to power discovered that she had never spoken truth at all, only power dressed as truth. Because Charlie Kirk didn't destroy Victoria Hayes that night, he simply held up a mirror and let her see what she had become, and in that reflection she discovered that the most dangerous deception is the one we practice on ourselves. When you convince yourself that your ideology is truth, you lose the ability to recognize truth at all. And when that happens, you don't need enemies to destroy your credibility, you've already destroyed it yourself. If this story reminds you that honesty matters more than narrative, that accountability applies to everyone equally, and that the greatest threat to journalism is journalists who forget what journalism is supposed to be, then subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember that the truth doesn't need to be manipulated to be powerful, it just needs to be told. What did you think of how Kirk exposed the media manipulation? Let us know in the comments, and remember, the best way to defeat deception isn't fighting harder, it's simply insisting on honesty.